ricksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here tonight on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about as we tick down to the midnight hour. Will there be another government shutdown? Is it going to happen? Just when you thought they had it all kind of sorted out, the House had a little plan that had a lot of flaws. The Senate had a plan with a lot of flaws. Yesterday, you had Nancy Pelosi taking to the floor for, 8+ hours, telling the story of Dreamers, of which obviously nothing in the House bill to solve that problem. And now you've got Rand Paul, good old Rand Paul, who said he cannot, in good honesty, in all good faith, just look the other way because his party is now complicit in the deficits. Nope, can't do it yet. And this is where the Twitters are losing their mind. Any sane, rational, thoughtful person with half a brain would go, but Rand, didn't you just vote for $1.5 trillion in giveaways to big corporations and to the very wealthy? Didn't you just do that? Didn't you just vote for that horrible tax scam of a bill, that ripoff, that heist? Didn't you just do that? So now you've found your conscience? Did the neighbor beat some sense into you? Or just all over the map? Now, he went back on, and look, I agree with him on the war stuff. I mean, we shouldn't be finding new wars to fight and new places to bomb. I'm with him on that. He says on and on and on, finding new wars to fight makes no sense. Absolutely agree. He says the day of reckoning, possibly in the form of a stock market collapse. And look, maybe it was the stock market, dropping a little bit more. Maybe that woke him up a little bit. I don't know, but it just seems curious to me. Part of me looks at someone like Rand Paul who just likes chaos. He was probably that kid that everybody hated because he was the one who was always the hard line when it suited him. Now understand what it's about is he wants 15 minutes to debate his amendment to keep the hard spending caps. As we talked about yesterday, the sequester caps that they put in, the hard spending caps that they put across the board, they just lifted. They wanted to lift. And Rand Paul saying, look, let's have a vote on it. Let's have all of the people like him and the hardline conservatives, let's have them have their vote. And I would argue that's what the vote about the bill is. If you don't like it, just vote it down. Vote against it. Again, I don't know how difficult that is. It seems fairly simple. It's how the process works. If you don't like it, you vote it down. Now, he wants his amendment to have his 15 minutes. And look, there's part of me that goes, it's simply about having on the record those people who, well, who are the quote, and I hate using fiscally responsible. I'm going to use the insane ones, because there's where you're supposedly fiscally responsible is before you spend the money. You know, this raising the debt ceiling stuff, this constant raising of the debt ceiling, this is about money already spent. So maybe you should have argued, before. But and this is where, if you're the leadership, you got to really hate this guy and really want to take him to task, because what's going to happen is you've got the groups like Grover Norquist, the Americans for Tax Reform, and all of those, the anti-tax pledgers, and all those people who are then going to attack anyone who doesn't vote for this amendment. And it's going to end up killing the legislation going forward, because the Democrats aren't going to come along, and we're going to end up in this stalemate position where the government then shuts down, which, again, I argue is what conservatives really want. People like Rand Paul like the government constantly opening and shutting. They like the chaos. They like the dysfunction, because it feeds into their frame that government can't and shouldn't work. And then that feeds into the argument, well, maybe we shouldn't have the government doing this stuff because it's always shutting down. Maybe we should move it into the private sector where they never have shutdowns and they never have problems like this, because they're dictatorial regimes where a CEO says do and you do. Taxpayers be damned. We the people be damned. Citizens be damned. But I can understand that's the whole push towards privatization. And it's not surprising to me that you've got people like Paul doing this. Now, understand we've had 4 short-term continuing resolutions since October. So I guess we've gotten into this habit of funding our government on a very short-term basis. And part of what these latest schemes are by the leadership on the Republican side is to kind of push that off a little bit. Maybe past the election, to where we can have a touch of sanity. It's maddening that here we are again in this moment where you thought for a minute, you just thought for a second that maybe there was some way forward, that maybe there was a way that we could have moved things along, and it's not. There's really not, and it's kind of scary stuff, because you've got him who's, well, I would argue being kind of off on the fringe anyway, wanting this. Now, is this a case of where John McCain had said I guess it was last year, John McCain said that Rand Paul is now officially working for Vladimir Putin? Is this a matter of working for Putin? Is this a matter of working for Trump? Or is this his own agenda? There's a bunch there, but at the end of the day, the average voter, this is the stuff that gets them angry. And I'm hoping it doesn't work this time, because look, you've got tons of active, engaged people who are saying, look, we're off the couch, our heads out of the sand, the blinders are coming off. This is no way to run a government. And Republicans had better be very aware of where this leads them, because this constant turmoil, this constant gridlock, this constant, dysfunction is something voters don't want. Look, we would love to go back to our lives. We would like to go back to our regularly scheduled lives, please. But here you've got this just insanity going on. I have yet to have someone explain to me why we have a debt ceiling to begin with. It's mind-blowing to me, because again, my argument has been all along, if you wanted to argue about spending, a good time to argue about that spending was before you spent the money. And I know people say, well, but Rick, at your household, you've got a credit limit and you can't go above that credit limit. And that's marginally true. But government doesn't run like your household. I know they love using the kitchen table analogy. It just doesn't work that way. You have crisis, you have emergencies, you have disasters, you have long-term infrastructure goals. You have big things that come up that have to be dealt with. Much like in your house, if you have to continue to use it, if the roof falls in, one way or another, you've got to fix it. Or you move. Now, as a country, we don't have the ability to just up and move. We got to fix the roof. And what's always interesting to me is you've got the Rand Pauls of the world who are saying, no, we need hard spending limits. We're gonna keep things in check. And I would argue that's what you're debating the spending before you spend the money is about. Don't start a war. Maybe fund it. And when you have a war, maybe raise taxes. Maybe make the pain go around. That's how we used to do things. I go back to World War II. And if you look at what they did during the Depression and World War II, they raised taxes significantly on people who had money. In fact, if you had, lots of money, your top marginal tax rate was well over 90%. Because guess why? We needed money to pay for things. And we still did run big deficits, but we still brought in revenue. And we don't seem to do that anymore. The Republican Party is exactly who they claim the Democrats are. They're a spendthrift party. The Democrats are a spendthrift party as well. The difference is who they spend on. The Republicans spend very lavishly on the well-heeled, on big corporations, on the very wealthy, and on toys. We love military toys, which is why it's not surprising that the Republicans want a big parade. Going to show off our toys. It's like show and tell when you're in kindergarten. You got a nice shiny tank. You want to show it off. You got a big phallic symbol on the back of a truck. So much better. Standing straight up. Erect, if you will. Democrats on the other side, they want to invest in the future of this country. Education, healthcare, infrastructure. And those used to be things we used to agree on of both parties. And yet somehow, judging by what we're seeing again tonight, not so much. This stuff, as my friend Bob Ney used to say, was a yawn vote. You went in, you raised the debt ceiling. It just happened. But now we've muddled all of this stuff together. And you can't seem to get anything done anymore. And that is not a failure of government. It's a failure of the people who are running our government. It's not a failure of our institutions. It's a failure of the people who are in charge of our institutions. And come November, we all, as we always do every 2, 4, 6 years, we have an opportunity to change who is in charge of those institutions within our government. And I highly suggest that we actively seek to do that, because these people have shown exactly what dysfunctional government looks like from top to bottom. Story after story, issue after issue, they are completely on the wrong side. So we've got lots to get to tonight. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. More on the memo, more on the Russia, more on the, George W. Bush back in the news. Stick around to find out what he had to say. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dworkin is going to be here to talk about the insanity that is our intelligence community. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
90% of the wealth, 10% of the people. 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people. 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the Industrial Workers of the World and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
It's odd that Washington Republicans are so loudly crowing about their passage of the Trump-McConnell-Ryan tax law. Odd because the people outside of Washington hate that law. Yes, hate. With a public approval rating of only 30%, the GOP's trillion-dollar giveaway to multinational corporations and multimillionaires turns out to be Congress's second most disliked domestic law in the past quarter century. Second only to the multiple attempts by Trump, McConnell, and Ryan last year to take away the health care coverage of 23 million Americans, a move so mingy that 77% of the public opposed it. Why do those doofuses keep trying to shove such wildly unpopular measures down people's throats? Because, as Daily Beast columnist Michael Tomasky succinctly explained, quote, they are serving their mega-rich donors and the most extreme elements of their base. Yes, in today's rigged political system, the special interests of a tiny minority trump the will of the great majority. Since the GOP's tax bill drastically reduced corporate taxes and increased many of ours, a few corporations are trying to dodge public fury by pulling a trickle-down trick on us. They're awarding a tiny portion of their bonanza to workers, not as pay raises, but as one-time, quote, bonus payments. Bank of America, for example, is doling out $145 million in worker bonuses while pocketing $2.6 billion it will get this year alone from the tax cut. In addition, the tax boondoggle for corporate giants guts our public treasury, so Washington Republicans and their army of corporate lobbyists are now demanding cuts in our Social Security, Medicare, and other safety net programs. This is Jim Hightower saying that is where America's inequality comes from. If the corporate GOP syndicate wonders why they're so despised, there it is.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, rain shed a farm red. My father son left to carry on, blue denim had his vein. Oh, he's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at ricksmithshow.com. So, Florida Republican Tom Rooney, and you gotta love, and this is not a good sign. But the Florida Republican says that the atmosphere on the House Intelligence Committee is absolute poison. He says that one reason for the tension is an erosion of trust. They don't trust each other. Of course they don't. He said it's exacerbated by the ongoing ethics investigation into the entire Republican staff. In fact, even the woman who answers the phone is under scrutiny for allegedly leaking things. He said that things were being handled by the Office of Congressional Ethics. He was also saying that the era of bipartisanship is a long gone thing. It's gone from that committee. And, you know, the thing is, you look at this administration, you look at what's going on. Leaks, really? Of course there are going to be leaks. The insanity that's going on here is just crazy. Now, one of the more interesting things to come out of this story today is that evidently they're going to be building a wall. Yes, they're going to be building a wall between the Republican staffers and the Democratic staffers. You cannot make this up. Trust me, can't make it up. And who dreamed up the big, beautiful wall between the Republican staff members and the Democratic staff members? None other than Devin Nunes. And you go, really? Is this how? It's maddening, I tell you. Here to talk a little bit about this, the memo, the parade, all of that. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
I am good. So what do you think about this? You've got this Tom Rooney saying that, you know, things are just poison.
Right. And he also says that every Republican staff member is under investigation by the Office of Congressional Ethics, pretty bluntly to the reporter. And, you know, I think it's starting to, you know, divide Republicans. Some that want to follow the rule of law and some that don't. And Devin Nunes is on the part of the one that doesn't. It's very, very weird. Just everything he does every single month, if you look in a timeline and you type in Devin Nunes, July 2017, like you start on a timeline, every single month he does something with a document or some kind of weird scheme in the middle of the night. And so he's been doing it every single month, and it's just become a trend now. And I think he's just a distraction. But I don't know if he knows what he's doing is illegal. And I guess that's for other folks to figure out. But I think this whole thing, like most of the stuff that he's done, he probably met with Trump about and met with other people at the White House about, and they, you know, carefully crafted this whole memo and everything else. I mean, that's as crazy as that would sound for any other White House, that is actually the thing that would make most sense in this case.
No, I'm with you. But here's the thing. Would you, honestly and truthfully, you know, would you trust Donald Trump, who has a history of throwing people under the bus? I mean, honestly, would you actually stake your career on what Nunes has done based on, you know, working for Trump and trusting him? I mean, it's mind-blowing to me.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, that's the question where it's like, why are you doing all this? And you know, again, it makes sense that the people who would be investigating him would have an immediate conflict if they were appointed as the transition chairs, as Richard Burr and Devin Nunes were, both Intel chairs. And you know, it's just everything he does is so funny. Like, why are you doing this? And you have to question, like, it's just weird. He either got trapped himself into some kind of, you know, obstruction part of things, or he lied about something and he's kind of caught and he doesn't know how to get out of it. And so he just keeps on digging. Or he's following Trump's lead and he truly, and I think this is the most likely case, he truly believes what he's doing is right. He truly believes what he's doing is not illegal, and kind of thinks like this is about presidency over party and over even the country. That's what I think. That's my thought.
I'm with you on that. But, you know, again, I look at who you're doing it for, And that's the part I
Right.
really struggle with, because, I go back to Trump has got a long history of throwing people under the bus to save his own skin. And you got to know, when all of the walls come tumbling down, that, the Teflon Don is going to want to try and protect his own. He's going to CYOA.
Yeah, and you can see that with Flynn and Manafort and Gates and Papadopoulos and about Carter Page. You can see that about, and it goes down the line. Steve Bannon, Kelly, in and out of the office. It's really kind of, it's a whole circus and a charade. Constant chaos is what his normal is.
Right.
If it were to be processed and slow, he'd probably quit. He would resign.
But didn't we know that during the election? Honestly, truthfully, I was talking about that the summer of 2016, that his management style is chaos, and that we were going to expect an awful lot of chaos, a lot of firings, a lot of turnover, and all of that. So that I don't think was unexpected.
Right. No, and I think the one thing that people do underestimate, and I hate saying this, especially in your program, is that Donald Trump is not as dumb as he's acting, and that's the sinister part of things. And I think people need to really think about the evil things he's said, the evil things he's done, and for how many decades he's done them for.
Yep.
And you can get to the truth of that matter is you have a very sinister person. And so, when he's cackling and when he talks crap about other people, like everything for the most part, a lot of times that's planned. And as sad as it is that he may have a trigger word he wants to throw out there, I think what we've got to do is to make sure he's accountable. We need to make sure that we realize he's a competent human being who knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
I don't think that the country wants to face that fact, though.
No, I'm right there with you. And when everyone's saying, well, he's having mental problems, I'm like, no, I just think he's an evil guy, and an evil genius, if you will, because you don't get to dominate the New York media scene for 30 years, and dominate. You don't get to dominate the news cycle whenever you want, for the last several years, if you're an idiot.
And look at his. Everybody can look up congressional hearings from Trump in the 80s. You can go on YouTube. I'm sure they're there. And he goes through tax law. I don't know, better than any tax lawyer I've ever seen. It's better than most senators can do. And that was like in 85 or something like that. And it was a different kind of Trump. And you see it come and go. I think he has a fun kind of game with it, going from competency and sternness to being wacky and out there. Kind of, it's just another way to offset you, because you're like, wait, what am I going to expect next? And then you're on your toes, and he's got control over you.
No, I look at this parade thing as just another thing to divide the country up, and masterfully so.
Sorry.
It was when I first saw it, I'm going, this is the take a knee thing again. This is every divisive issue that they throw out there to get us fighting amongst ourselves and distracted away from what's going on with him and what's going on with the Russia investigation.
Yeah, there was a reporter that called me that when it came out, and she was the one who actually told me about it because I wasn't aware. And she's like, "Do you have an official comment on that?" And I was like, "That's the stupidest effing thing that I've ever heard in my entire life." And now we find out it cost $22 million and expected, which probably means 50 in Trump land. And he'll probably have his own companies, do it.
Of course.
Or he'll do it via a partnership licensing deal where he can act like he's not responsible for any of his business deals. Anyways, but yeah, it's maddening.
But beyond that, what it does do though, is it's going to again give the right and the left something to really fight about, because the left is looking at it going, that isn't something that we do in this country. We love our military, we want to respect and honor them, and we want to do that by making sure that they have health care when they need it, they get treatment if they have PTSD. We honor our commitments to them to pay their pensions and all of that stuff. We're going to give them what they need when they go into battle, all of that stuff. And yet on the right, you've got them going, well, we want videos and we want props and we want photo ops, while not doing the whole, funding of the VA and funding for the equipment that they need, and go down the list.
Yeah, it's a misallocation of funds, mismanagement, and abuse of power. You can't just. First of all, I don't think that you can roll that kind of equipment on DC streets. DC streets will get destroyed from a little bit of salt on them. So I'm not sure how far you're going to make it with that kind of weight around this city. Also, I believe that DC would somehow try and force it to be banned. I don't know how that would work, and I don't know the possibility, but I did see the city council sent out a no parking sign with tanks and say, it was like all the parks are open, and then the next thing said something along the lines of no tanks allowed. And it's really like that's the kind of conversations we're having. We're talking about this. Like, why are we talking about this? Like, this is just crazy. And this is exactly what he wants.
Exactly. And this is what I was saying. This was one of those evil genius moments where he just threw it out there, and now we're consumed with it because I've been talking about it for the last couple of days.
Right. And but he knows he's going to run out of gas here. And so I'm not sure how much longer he's going to want this audience. So maybe he'll resign. But I just don't think that there's much wiggle room for him. Again, it's not about any document. Don't worry about any dossier, any memo, anything like that. That's not going to discount the fact that he was doing business in person in Russia for the past 30 years. That doesn't do anything besides the fact that he definitely has done at least $500 million in business with Russians directly by selling condos in New York, Florida, and then making money off of his vodka company in Russia. He actually sold vodka in Russia. And he also had a lot of art transactions as well that were kind of sketchy. One of them was he bought a statue of Christopher Columbus, and he wanted it to replace the Statue of Liberty. That didn't happen. It's now he put it in Puerto Rico. So it's the only thing he gave them was one of the ugliest statues I've ever seen. So anyways.
That's nuts.
But yeah.
But what's interesting, I love the vodka thing, because here's a guy who has his name on vodka but won't drink it. And
right,
I guess
right.
was it that Vladimir Putin had a vodka and then he wanted a vodka? What was it?
I think it was outletted through Israel. I can't remember how he did it, but it was Drinks America, I believe, was the company, and he started it in New York and had a big opening there. But then they had a kind of get together without Trump there at this Russian oligarchs. I think it was called the Russian Millionaires Convention, like literally, and that was held at the Crocus place. The guys, the Agalarovs, those are the ones that helped set up the agent, set up the Don Jr. Russian lawyer meeting. There's so many people involved with this. It's crazy. Like now we have, I say on an internal map here, we have over 175 people that are involved with anything involving restructured justice, and that's what we publicly see. It really is out of proportion because they let it go nuts. Anyways, it's really, I want everybody to make sure that they wake up, because this is going to get bad very quickly.
I'm hoping that the lights come on very quickly. And what was interesting to me, and I don't know if you saw this week you had former President George W. Bush in the United Emirates, at a conference there he was brought there by the Milken Institute, one of these right-wing think tanks, in my view. And he said, look, it's pretty clear, there's clear evidence Russia meddled in the 2016 election. Now, he said, I don't know if it had anything to do with the outcome, but we can't have them doing that. He says, our democracy is only as good as people's trust in the results. And I agree with, finally, something I agree with George W. Bush on.
It's the simplest answer, and so straightforward. I think it actually resonates with Trump's base a little bit, because it's a reminder of a guy that at least had the nerve to lie to you completely and act like everything was normal and what they're doing is fine and cover up, very well. This is just, like, again, an exposed circus, but, the White House is on fire and people are like, no, there's no fire. And it's like, the whole thing is getting out of control. I hope he slows everything he does down.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because, hopefully we're getting further down the road with the Mueller investigation. I keep hearing, all of these people that are being spoken with. What are you paying attention to over the next couple of days, the next several weeks, that we should be focusing on?
I'd say for now we should be very worried about Rod Rosenstein,
right,
and protecting him. At the moment, they just started, the Tea Party just started running ads against Rosenstein and to push for the firing of Rosenstein. So I think that's our next fight. And besides that, it would be again to protect Mueller, but we just need to at least make sure that there's constant resistance out there, specifically for Rosenstein, to not get fired, so that it can't just be done and then we have to react. At that point, I think protests will happen, whether, I don't even know if they have to be organized at that point, if he fired Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah.
But
protests would happen.
That's the next battle.
Protests would happen, but would the tanks start rolling in on them? Because that's the other part of this that freaks me out, Scott, is, we're going to have by having these kind of big shows of military might, do we start normalizing seeing that on our streets across the country?
Yeah, I mean, if you post us enough on any issue, it becomes normal. Like, if we talked about the nuclear button at all, we wouldn't, like, that to me, if I saw it right now, I'd be like, not again. And it would be more normal than it was the time before. And that's what's happening with everything.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing that with laws too, obviously, ethics specifically. I mean, it's one of the most disgusting, disgraceful. I mean, I come up with all the D words possible, but it's just pathetic. And I hope that Americans are sick and tired of having bullies that support, people who beat their wives and, help them try and be successful in life when they haven't even been, paid any price for their actions. People need to have consequences, or it's not going to deter those laws from being broken in the future. And we need to make sure that we don't let this be normal. So every once in a while, I think it's great to, make sure that we really step up the pressure. And I think this week it's going to be a combination of DACA and protecting Rosenstein.
Yeah, I'm with you. I guess I know I said last question, but are you expecting a shutdown in the next couple hours?
Yes. That's pretty bluntly.
How long do you think it'll last?
Till tomorrow at like 11 a.m. I mean, I don't think it would last long, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how people are going to split on this. It could be just a lot of chaos again. But I really don't think it's going to last a whole long. But they will. I mean, they'll have the weekend, so they could probably stretch it out to Monday easily, without too much of the government being shut down for too long. I don't know how that's normal either. Yeah. But I would say that it's about close to 100% chance at this point. I mean, it's late, but if something, I haven't checked the news in the last 20 minutes, so if something pops up, and I missed something, then I apologize.
No, we'll make sure we keep following you. I suggest everyone follow you on Twitter @Funder. You are the guy that I go to keep up with on the Russian investigation and all of that.
That's what we do, is the opposition research and rapid response. But specifically, we've investigated every single member of the administration. Trump, his entire family, his entire extended family, every business relationship he's ever had hundreds of articles printed about our work. And it's just been, it feels like I'm serving my country at least at the way I can, because fighting the Russian influence campaign, online, in person, in every way we can, every single day, it's a tough job. But I'll tell you, every day I talk to resistors across the country, and they just inspire me, and it's fuel for the fire. And people are more fired up than I've ever seen them in my entire life. And they're ready to vote. They're ready to organize. And I think we're in a great spot. We just need to follow through and sprint through the finish line.
I'm right there with you, Scott. I appreciate you taking time, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Cheers, brother.
Excellent stuff. Scott Dworkin. Again, follow him on Twitter @Funder. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show. Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you. And it's going down.
Well, I don't really like Rand Paul. Not a big fan. Definitely not somebody I would want to have a beer with or hang out with or even be in the same room with. You got to give him at least a little bit of credit that he's standing on his principles and, wasn't or wasn't going to allow the big vote today to go forward because he wasn't going to get his 15 minutes. Wanted 15 minutes to vote on his amendment to not take the hard caps away. And give him credit. Look, he's been one of these guys who's been saying all along, we can't be spending any money that we can't afford. And no. Interestingly enough, the leadership doesn't want to have that amendment vote because it might show who these spenders are. Because I said the other day, I'm amazed. The Screwquester's gone. They want to get rid of those spending caps now that they hold the purse. So it looks like maybe possibly, who knows what's going to happen before the night is out. Maybe we shut down again tomorrow morning. But here to give us some thoughts, our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here.
So what do you think? We shutting it down tonight?
I mean, he has said that he is prepared to go until 1 a.m. until he gets his 15 minutes. The government is set to shut down at midnight, but we're not going to see any actual repercussions from that until a little bit later in the day on Friday. So we could go beyond that initial deadline, but that in itself is not necessarily a death sentence for the government. So that's moving forward. In the lower chamber, we have a little bit of drama as well. There is a lot of resistance brewing from the Freedom Caucus. Nancy Pelosi has said that she is not going to be supporting this bill, and a number of Democrats have also come out and said that they similarly won't be backing it and are encouraging their colleagues to do the same. So it's anybody's guess at this point, but it's not necessarily looking as optimistic as it was just a couple of days ago.
So maybe the president's going to get his dream of a good shutdown.
He apparently would love to have a shutdown, as he said, coming on the heels of Sarah Sanders saying last month rather, that a shutdown is not in the preference of the administration. We certainly have a different tune coming from the president himself, and he could very well, as you mentioned, get his wish. Now, with Rand Paul, I mean, there's part of me that gets why the leadership doesn't want to hold this vote, because they're going to have to raise their hand and say, the last 6 years of the Obama term, when we were screaming about fiscal responsibility and screaming about caps and screaming about all this stuff, was all just BS. Exactly. And then when you vote against it or, something like that, you are going to have a custom built, attack ad, something that could very easily be scored by conservative groups or whatnot. And that's just not a political situation that anybody wants. Perhaps most so McConnell, who is, generally regarded as a politically savvy player and whatnot. Whether or not that's actually true has been certainly challenged by his own, failures in the past years. But this is one thing that he is seeking to prevent his members from having as a bit of a black eye. Yeah, and I'm not condoning violence. I'm not saying anyone should be acting in a violent way, but I can understand why Rand Paul's neighbor attacked him. Ooh. Now, I'm not saying anyone should. I think you can get to it. Well, Rick, I, for one, don't believe in attacking politicians. I'm just going to say that now. And, for our friends in the NSA or, listeners who may be watching, please don't report me. I am saying that no one should do it, but I'm saying that I understand it. I understand it. I'm not advocating it. I'm not willing it to happen. I understand. I just kind of, this was the kid in the class that everyone wanted to smack. Yeah, Rand Paul a couple of years ago did I guess, can you still call it a comedy routine if nobody laughed? But there was a huge, Washington dinner where everybody in the Congressional Press Corps comes together and lawmakers come up and give a, humorous speech. And that year, we had Anthony Weiner going up before everything, went to hell with that, who gave a, really good gut-busting speech. And then we had Rand Paul speaking as well. And that just did not have the same exact timing. That included him trying to describe editorial cartoons about him that he's seen, him making some jokes about his hair that really fell flat. And, just one of the more painful speeches I've seen in Washington, and I've seen a lot of really bad comedy acts here. Yeah, I see. I assume he was the kind of guy who was much more tolerable when he was worshiping Aqua Buddha. Just yeah, that is a blast from the past. That is an old one there. Yeah, you just can't let that go though. That's retro. I'm surprised. Going way retro, and we're gonna leave that there. I'm moving along. If you want to talk about Aqua Buddha, I'm more than happy to shower praises upon our watery mystic lord. There you go. I'm leaving it. Well, since we're on the Aqua Buddha, why isn't the woman who I guess they tied up and took down to the river, why isn't she speaking out right now? I mean, that is, I totally forgot that aspect of the story. I'm kind of at a loss for words here. I'm trying to remember what exactly happened. That was a weird year in general. That was, I think 2010, of course, which saw the, women have a way of shutting that down, rape remarks from Todd Aiken, just the Zell Miller stuff from the guy in Alaska, Christine O'Donnell, and the, I'm not a witch controversy. And Aqua Buddha in that period of time was, I guess, kind of one of the more tame things that we saw from that. But I mean, stop and think about what you just laid out and some of the other insanity
You know, I just reminded someone last night of the Foster Freeze comment that, you know, women should, you know, use aspirin for birth control. Just put it between the gal's knees. And, you know, it's amazing to me that it's taken this long for women to say enough of this BS.
I mean, I think they've been saying it for quite some time. You know, as you recall, Todd Aiken didn't make it. I believe Richard Murdoch, who was the person who knocked out Dick Lugar, you know, made some pretty terrifying remarks as well. He didn't make it. And then, you know, black women in particular ended up saving the day in Alabama with Doug Jones. So I think they've been, you know, pretty politically savvy in the past couple of years. And
yeah, the past couple. I mean, but you know, all this stuff, you just go, how do you put up? I mean, I don't know how you, I don't know how they put up with it.
I don't either. I mean,
no idea.
Especially now. I mean, with everything that's going on, and with just the daily insanity that's coming from the administration itself.
And now you find out in the White House, they just, I guess, another spousal abuser was in the administration. You go, you know, are we surprised? I mean, look, and I'm not at all surprised that Kelly backed this Porter guy up. Not one little bit am I surprised.
And also just a clearly full-throated endorsement in his initial response to allegations that came from his first ex-wife from the first Daily Mail story, you know, saying that he is somebody who he has been honored to work with and is always found to be professional. You know, yesterday, the press secretary coming out and saying that he had the confidence of the president and John Kelly as well, and then issuing a statement last night where, you know, we got a lot of attention for the fact that he said that he was shocked, but he also said that he stood by his initial comments and that everybody, you know, should have a chance to stand up for themselves or whatnot. But the fact that he didn't really back down, he just, you know, added on a little bit of language to, I guess, give it something resembling a human response, but overall just kind of sticking with his initial message.
Again, not surprising to me. I've known a couple of generals who, you know, that's not their thing. They don't back down. We keep it in there and get the job done.
I mean, he's certainly bringing that attitude, and if this is the hill he wants to die on, I'm not sure what the wisdom is or what kind of mindset they're approaching this with. You know, this is also somebody who just a couple of months ago, you know, stood up in the White House briefing room and talked about how things used to be sacred in his days. He said that, you know, the sanctity of life used to be sacred. Our armed servicemen used to be sacred. Women in particular was something that he said used to be sacred. And, you know, now it turns out that one of the key voices in a scandal that has just really raised some serious questions about the attitude towards women in this administration is coming from John Kelly himself. So, you know, I guess it's eating his words a bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I remember, I saw the quote and it made me go, I remember thinking at the time, well, when in history did you know, was life sacred? When did the lives of soldiers, when was that sacred? My grandfather told me stories from World War II, old blood and guts. Yeah, your blood and your guts. Now, when was all this stuff sacred? Because I must have missed it.
Yeah, I mean, and that was also given during the period of time where the media still had a bit of a love affair with John Kelly. He was still viewed as somebody who was going to be able to, you know, tamp down on Trump's, you know, more wild instincts and to try to craft him into a more presidential president. And that was viewed at the time as perhaps a veiled dig at Donald Trump. Now, though, I think it's pretty safe to say that, you know, that was kind of a stretch and that was some extremely wishful thinking that, you know,
that someone was going to change Trump. So the question is has Trump changed Kelly, or is this who Kelly was?
You know, that's a good question. And we're seeing more and more that, you know, John Kelly is somebody who is a hardliner when it comes to immigration. Shouldn't necessarily be a surprise considering he got the top spot at the Department of Homeland Security for a good period of time. So I'm not necessarily sure what's changing, but we're certainly getting a, you know, much different view than what a lot of people initially thought he was going to be. And I think that probably, you know, comes with the fact that there was this idea of a general being able to come in and step in and, you know, being this honorable sort of figure that's going to get things done that really wasn't based on much of anything beyond just the, I guess, wishful thinking in the media's sort of desire to build some kind of narrative around that. I'm not really sure myself. It's interesting. I'm not sure. And I'm sure, like, I probably thought the same thing when that happened. I'm just not sure what exactly we were basing that off of.
I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. And evidently now the White House is changing their story on this Omarosa. She was actually fired now, didn't resign.
Which, okay, so
which is
last night on Celebrity Big Brother, Omarosa said something along the lines of she is haunted by some of Trump's tweets.
Right.
And then from what we see in the White House, as soon as you make a statement like that, you are completely and totally thrown under the bus. And this happened today with Rod Shah, the White House spokesperson who was filling in today for Sarah Huckabee Sanders. He made a quip about how she was fired 4 times on The Apprentice, and that she was let go from the White House as well. A pretty, key sign that she was fired. And this, again, is another example of them changing their tune when it becomes politically convenient, even though they are on the record saying that that was not the case. The initial statement from the White House said that Omarosa resigned. Trump called her a very good person. And, now it turns out that that apparently was a lie put forward by the White House. And that, raises credibility questions. When you have these, when you have a desire just to lie about the little things, that obviously makes it harder to trust the bigger things. And, I guess I shouldn't be surprised about this, but, it's such a petty thing to have fudged the truth on in the first place. And now just throwing it aside without really a second thought just boggles my mind.
Well, as my grandfather always said, there are some people who would lie when the truth would be better. And we're seeing that play out in an entire administration.
We certainly are. And, again, not the biggest misleading statement we've seen coming from out of the White House, but just kind of shocking in the scope of how petty things can be dealing with the current leadership.
Now, the other part of this on the big, and I don't know why she's back on Celebrity Apprentice or Celebrity Big Brother, but I guess she said the country's not going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, she spoke out pretty heavily against Trump, saying that, she wanted to be the person to rein him in and to be the voice in his ear. A little bit self-serving, considering that she stayed on until apparently she was, as we now know, fired. But yeah, nevertheless, she is coming out and she is signaling herself as somebody who's going to be a thorn in the side of the administration. As it stands right now, that's going to be on Celebrity Jeopardy. There's not really been much talk about her having a higher role beyond that. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
So last question then. Does she have tapes, as some people are saying that, because she, I guess, tapes everything. Does she have the secret tapes?
Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
Oh, I hope so as well. Justin, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. Change. The Rick Smith Show.
Days new, and everyone is waiting on you. And you got time.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So it appears that, Twitter hasn't been doing a lot of anything in the getting rid of the Russian propaganda videos. In fact, there was a CNN story that said, hey, there are all these videos with millions of views on the Vine platform, evidently there for months, that the claims are that, Twitter should have known were from these Kremlin-linked troll groups, and yet they're still there. And what you've got is you've got a lot of questions, because I use Twitter a lot, and you can see who's pushing these hashtags, especially on the far right. Now understand, even if this were on the far left, I would be saying the same thing. It's got to be something that's got to be reined in. And, I take very little, when the trolls come after me, if they're not verified, if they're the eggs, or if they look like, 16 other people, And it's one of these moments where you just kind of, it's just kind of mind blowing in that there's all of this stuff that going on that even George W. Bush understands is going on, that even Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, is saying, hey, it's going on. It's happened and it's going to happen again. And yet you have an administration, for one reason or another, either it's incompetence or it's, they're in on it, that will do absolutely nothing to move us forward. And this is one of those times that, we've got to really be paying attention and really engaged and active in what's happening. It is just completely mind-blowing to me. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share some of those thoughts. If you're listening on a station that only picks up the first hour, head on over to thericksmithshow.com to pick up hour 2. And be sure to share it along. And for our folks on the Progressive Voices Network, feel free to share our content with our friends and come on and give us some thoughts. In the second hour, we're going to talk a little bit about education. Going to talk a little bit about the DACA immigration, what's going on, where we can be going, and all of that. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since the prehistoric ages, in the days of ancient Greece, one down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes. And then the Renaissance came, and the times continued to change. Nothing stayed the same, but they were
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So we're counting down to the deadline, to the shutdown. And again, I keep coming back to, you look at this Dreamer issue, it is mind-blowing to me that we can't get this done, can't get this right, can't get it passed through. Because look, it's something that the vast majority of people in this country see and have said, look, we want them to stay. We want it to be legal. We want to end this. Stop pushing us to the brink. Stop with the 24 style shutdowns. Look, we've had 4 of these continuing resolutions going on number 5. At some point, we need functional, sane, rational, do your freaking job government. It's just plain nuts. But here to share a little bit of his thoughts on maybe where we should be going with this immigration issue and also with the Dreamers. I've asked Tom Jawitz to come talk with us. He's the Vice President of Immigration Policy there at the Center for American Progress. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, thanks so much.
So, I keep coming back to this. Why can't we just get this done? Over 70% of the population in this country thinks this should be done already.
Yeah, it's bigger than that even. 70% is probably a few months old. The latest polls that are coming out are showing that up to 86, 87% of the American public supports the idea of providing Dreamers with the opportunity to stay in this country. More and more people in Congress, on both the Democratic and Republican sides of the aisle, are saying this is an imperative, it has to happen, and are saying that really the way to get this done is to focus on the problem at hand, right? So the president basically, after creating this problem in September, said Congress has to fix it. And after they made a lot of progress toward a deal, several deals actually, he sort of rejected them all and instead threw back kind of this really crazy, expansive wish list of just radically reshaping our immigration system going forward. And that's just not going to work in this Congress. All that does is put more differences on the table. And what people are starting to realize is you need to focus in on what the problems are right now. And at this point, if you look at what Republican leadership is saying in the Senate, for instance, you look at what Democrats as well are saying for the most part, focus on protecting dreamers. If you want to look at some smart, sensible border security measures, that's possible. Those two things could get you across the finish line in Congress.
Are we against the idea of border security? I mean, because I've got friends who are saying, "Well, you Democrats just want everybody running across the border. You don't want any borders. You want all these people coming here." Do we want border security?
Yeah, no one disagrees with the idea that we want border security, but it has to happen in a conversation where you're doing something that makes sense for the country, makes sense for border residents, makes sense for the American taxpayer, right? So the Department of Homeland Security under this administration just reported a few months ago that the border is more secure and harder to cross physically than it ever has been in the last 45 years, right? So that's the baseline we're working off of. And when you listen to what Homeland Security says, what government reports say, what experts on the border say, throwing up hundreds of miles of additional barriers, physical barriers, a wall, won't make a difference really. Investing in something like our ports of entry, for instance, which is where the vast majority of illegal drugs that are coming into the country come through, that's a smart investment, right? If you want to stop fentanyl from coming into the country, you don't put up additional miles of wall. You try and make sure you have the right ports inspectors there, you have the right customs officers at the ports so that they're not overworked and they're not just waving cars through because they don't have the ability and the staffing to actually stop more and inspect them appropriately.
Yeah, and I would also argue not just on the southern border, but on the east and west coasts as well. More port security, maybe checking a lot more of the containers coming in. I read something that we check less than 1% of the shipping containers that come into this country.
Yeah, and actually food security is a major issue. And if you look at where the investments are made nowadays, they're absolutely not made in those areas. There's a lot we could do that would actually make the American public safer, healthier, and be much more cost-effective than doing the kinds of things that are being proposed. So there is a bipartisan agreement, no question. I would take one step back from your intro, though, and just say that the disagreements in Congress right now and the situation happening in the House of Representatives while they're waiting for Rand Paul to stop his objections, the unanimous consent, and allow for a vote in the Senate to go over to the House is not something that is solely focused on what Democrats in the House are demanding with respect to Dreamers. I mean, there is, it appears, a massive defection taking place among House Republicans who simply don't like the idea that the budget deal that was cut in the Senate would invest tremendously in discretionary domestic spending, things like just making sure they're investing in education and proper health care in this country. And so the reason why we're at this impasse potentially in the House is because 50, 60, 70 Republicans may well end up just defecting from the Speaker and rejecting the bill for that reason.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier about the end of these hard caps that they won during the sequester era. That you just go, the time to argue this stuff would have been when you were spending the money. Stop already.
Yeah, before the trillion dollar deficit created through this tax bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it ironic that you've got Rand Paul, who's taking this hard line tonight, and yet he voted for that tax heist.
Yeah, where was that fire then?
Exactly. But here's the thing: you were talking about if they wanted to get this stuff done. I truly believe that the president doesn't want anything to actually get done. That he likes the chaos and he likes the division, and the base really just eats it up when nothing gets done, especially on the immigration issue, because we can keep beating that horse to death. And looking at this as we move down the road, though, it eventually has to get done, because the longer this takes out, the longer this draws out, the more these folks who are in limbo right now are harmed, right?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things on that. I'll say, first of all, I think there's absolutely good reason to wonder whether the administration really wants to fix this problem. After all, it's this administration that created the problem. I actually just did a piece up on our website, AmericanProgress.org, a couple of days ago that runs through 5 things the president himself, without Congress, could do to ameliorate some of the harm that he's caused and to stem the problems going forward for at least some period of time. But separate and apart from that, yeah, that's right. There are, on average, about 122 people who've been losing their DACA status every single day since September 5th. So about 19,000 so far have lost their protections. Beginning on March 6th, that number is going to increase dramatically to about 1,000 people a day. You've got about 900 of these folks who are working in the military, who are enlisted in the military, and about 20,000 who are in classrooms every single day as teachers and educators. I mean, these are individuals who, when they lose their DACA on that day, they lose their work authorization. Their employer knows the date on which their work authorization expires, and they're going to lose their jobs, right? They're going to lose in most states their driver's licenses. In many states, their in-state tuition. They're going to lose in many states their ability to just go to public colleges and universities entirely. South Carolina, Georgia have those kinds of limits in place. And so, there are real human consequences. Does this have to get solved? I mean, is it an inevitability in that sense? I don't think so. I don't think we should count on anything being inevitable. I think there could be really, really dramatic and terrible human costs to inaction that may well result if people don't get engaged and really, bring some heat to these members of Congress who need to feel the pressure.
Yeah, but here's the thing: you've got a segment of the electorate, and I would argue that's the 36% that still support this president, saying that we should be get the big bus and shipping people out of here. Why is that a bad idea?
Well, I mean, why it's a bad idea? It's a bad idea for a lot of reasons. I mean, for first start, I think we really do need to address just the moral imperative of sort of protecting communities and protecting families. These are individuals who, in the DACA community in particular, for instance, have by definition lived in the United States since they were children and have lived here for at least 10 years.
Right.
So they're just parts of our families and our communities are parts of our workforce. But more broadly, it'd be really damaging to the economy in the country as a whole and in all these different states and industries in which they work. I mean, take one step back and think about what it would be like for the children in the classrooms where their teachers, 20,000 teachers and educators are working, to have their teachers no longer be able to come to work in the morning anymore because they were forced to lose their jobs as a result of losing DACA and potentially also being deported as well. I mean, that's something that will have an impact on how those children view the world, view their country, and that's something we should be concerned about as a country.
Yeah, but I get this a lot from the folks on the right who are saying, look, these people are illegal, they've broken the law, they're all criminals, so we've dehumanized them. A segment of our population has dehumanized them to the point where they're just criminals, and they need to be treated as such. And how do you get through to someone who has that kind of a mindset? Because and I'm sure you've got people in Congress who think this way, and how do you come to a deal, or a position, a policy, a resolution to all of this?
I think probably the best way to approach those kinds of situations, and it's true. It's no question that's something that I think is something you have to face, and it's something that affects not just the issue with Dreamers, but with immigration more broadly. It really does come down in a lot of cases to telling people stories and having personal connections, real, meaningful personal connections with individuals, and that takes a lot of time. That's why organizers who are on the ground every single day in these communities and are working to get people out there and get them to engage with people who don't have the same views as them and to understand and appreciate what they're bringing to their communities has such a hard job ahead of them. It's such a critically important job because there's something about the recent studies have come out, and this is actually it's pretty consistent studies have come out showing that in many cases the view of immigrants is the worst in communities that have the least access to immigrants, right? And so the less contact you actually have with immigrants, the more likely you are to be fearful or resentful of immigrants in the country. And so that's something that I think, one, demographically just will change and is changing right now. And it's some of those places where there is that change taking place, where you see some of that tension. But there are communities on the other side of that as well. There are communities, Crete, Nebraska, Storm Lake, Iowa, communities in these really rural states, rural parts of the state that have actually seen their communities shift over time and have seen immigrants come in, and they're at the point now where they're past that tipping point, and they can actually recognize that the immigrants who are in their communities are extremely contributing members of their communities. They are in many ways the reason why the communities have not shrunk and had to close their school districts and merge with other school districts. The reasons why the communities are so vibrant. I mean, that's the kind of place where you start to see people, sort of like get to the other side of the issue and realize that immigrants are part of the future of this country, just like they're part of our past.
Yeah, and they're not all part of MS-13, right?
Yes, I think that's very much true.
Yeah, because I keep hearing that a lot too. Oh, they're all MS-13, and they're going to cut your children's head off.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things are happening there. I mean, one, whenever that's discussed in the context of DACA recipients, I mean, it's important to remember that DACA recipients, again, they're sort of like I almost hesitate to say this, but I mean, these are kids who are raised in this country. They've gone through our school system, many times from elementary school to secondary school through college. In order to get DACA, they have applied for work authorization. They've gone through background checks, security checks periodically every 18 months, every 2 years, passing these background checks. And so these are individuals who have been thoroughly vetted. More generally, you're starting to hear from Attorney General Sessions, from the President, references to MS-13 in connection with these unaccompanied young children from Central America who have been coming to the United States over the last few years in increasing numbers, or at least historically. The numbers aren't that high right now. But these are kids who are, for the most part, fleeing MS-13, right? These are individuals who actually, by and large, when they get their applications to request protection, especially if they're represented by counsel, are often able to make strong cases for protection in this country, and that's because they were, in many cases, being threatened by gang violence in their home countries.
So let me ask you, as this is going forward, because obviously this isn't going to be settled anytime in the next few days. Are you confident that something will be resolved? And what do you see the time frame being? Because, as you pointed out earlier, the longer we get down the road, the more people who are going to be harmed by this, especially when we get into March and April. Are you hopeful?
So I've been doing immigration policy for long enough that I would absolutely never say that I'm confident or think this is inevitable. This is hard work, and it requires people to be vigilant. And that's why I think you see, immigration groups, the Dreamers themselves, in Congress every single day, in communities every single day, trying to raise awareness about the importance of this issue. So that's going to have to happen and just keep happening. I think we're going to need people to sort of not just observe this and sort of start to learn about it. I think we have seen a real growth in the awareness of this issue among the American public, but I don't know that we've yet sort of crossed the threshold where it's something that's fully personalized and decided that they themselves need to be fighting for. And I think that if and when we get to that point, we'll begin to see, to the extent that there are people out there who think of themselves as being the sort of the hashtag resistance, right? This is that fight right now. In many ways, this is one of the great civil rights fights of our time. And I think that once we'll start to see themselves as part of that fight, we'll have the energy we need to drive ourselves to a victory in Congress.
We'll see. Is it fair that the Democrats have been taking so many arrows over not, making a stronger stand during the last shutdown? I mean, there were protests out in front of Chuck Schumer's house, I guess, saying he's not going to sleep until this issue is done. Is it fair to attack them on this?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I don't by and large think this is a partisan issue. I think the groups that are fighting for this, I've been in a lot of meetings with a lot of Dreamers who have been throwing some of those arrows, and when they get heat, they respond with something which I think pretty compelling, which is, I'm fighting for my life. I'm fighting for my ability to stay in the country that I've always been in. I'm fighting for my sister, my brother, my cousin, and so I think it's personal in that sense, in the realist sense and in the right sense. How the shutdown played out in the end. I think there was a strong. It seemed like there was a strong plan getting into it. I'm not sure there's a terribly strong plan getting out of it, and I don't know that we actually gained a lot of strength for the issue as a result of that.
Nope.
But I think we've lived for another day, and frankly, what we're seeing in the House side right now potentially is that other day.
No, I'm hoping at some point this comes to resolution, because we've been. I would argue most of my lifetime. I mean, you go back to the 80s, and we had immigration policy that they thought they fixed, and we've had these. Every president's gone through it. I mean, you heard Bill Clinton say it, you heard George W. Bush say it, you heard Obama say it. At some point, resolution has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we had a major overhaul of immigration in 1990. In 1986, we had the big amnesty, civil no-go from Ronald Reagan, and then in 1990, we had the Immigration Act, which did reform our immigration laws. We really haven't had any major reforms to our immigration system since 1990, other than enforcement-only provisions that in many ways were extremely punitive, extremely counterproductive, and really made the problem worse. I mean, a lot of the laws that President Clinton signed, frankly, in 1996 on immigration are pretty directly responsible for a lot of the inhumanity in our system today, and the fact that people the fact that we've built to an undocumented population as large as we have it today.
Last line of questioning I've got for you, I always ask people, well, if what we have is broken and it's not working, what should we be moving for? If you had the chance to write this, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, I think by and large you want to have an immigration system that makes sense for the American public, makes sense for American business, makes sense for American families. You want to look at our immigration system today. You want to see how it functions. Because in many ways we have an immigration system that works in some ways. It's just that it doesn't work legally, right? It works sort of extra legally. What you want is a system that looks at the realities of our economy, the realities of families, and builds a system around that, so that people can work their ways through the system and they're not working around the system. And so that's I think, kind of the overarching principle, I think. And then once you do that, you get out of the stigma of people breaking the law and being, undocumented and all that stuff, and you have people who actually have a plausible way of working through the system. So they can come here right now. If your brother's a U.S. citizen and you want to come here, you could be waiting for decades, 30, 40 years in order to come into this country. That's not a very functional way to actually have a system, it's coming to the country. If you've got, family here, strong family, and you've got an opportunity and a willingness to sort of work hard and contribute.
Yeah, good point. Tom, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. I look forward to talking to you again. I'm sure this is not going away anytime soon. I'd love to have you back again to keep us up to date.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. If you want to check out Tom's writings, we'll get a link over at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check out his articles on what we should be doing and what we can be doing and what this president could do. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
I don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you. But I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the Industrial Workers of the World and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. So the Defense Secretary, James Mattis, evidently he said that the Army is going to be taking the lead to preparing clear options for the big parade. Evidently they're going to draw up some plans. They're going to come in with the itinerary, the size of the parade, locations, and of course the costs. He said that when I get the clear options, I'll send them over to him. I'm saying it's going to happen. And they're kind of looking at the day of November 11th this year, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. And I think as a couple of people have told me, I don't know how Washington's infrastructure is going to take it. You're going to start tearing things up. It would honestly be a black eye for the country if a tank went rolling down the street and ended up getting swallowed up by a sinkhole. That would be, I would argue that would be a bad thing. Just kind of saying. But what's interesting to me is you have the right wing's love affair with our military. And, they take pictures and, waving flags and doing all that. But yet they always seem to fall short of actually, honoring, respecting, outside of, the pomp and circumstance and the flag waving. And I look at what's going on in Kansas right now. There's one of these front groups called Veterans in Defense of Liberty. Yeah, another one of those. Their mission, evidently, and you got to question what the mission is. But according to their site, their mission is to take care of veterans, is to to push for policies that help veterans, to help advocate for veterans issues. Turns out, according to the Better Business Bureau, the Veterans in Defense of Liberty, they got a giant F from the good folks at the Better Business Bureau. Evidently, virtually no money whatsoever actually goes to veterans. Turns out that, and this is just one of those things that just blows my mind, because this is a group that, if you check out their website, they were pushing for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. They've basically been totally in the bag for Trump. But if you look at what the Better Business Bureau said that their numbers were, evidently they paid this group, American Target Advertising in Virginia, I guess for 2014, they paid them almost $500,000 of the $517,000 that they brought in for direct mail advertising. So they're sending out all of this, they're raising all this money, sending out tons of these advertisements, all of these flyers, all these mailers, and there's $17,000 at the end of the year to do something else. And I got to wonder, does any of that go to veterans at all? The next year, the following year, 2015, they brought in about $556,000 and spent $525,000 of that to American Targeted Advertising. And you go, am I missing something? And you go, no, this is what these shill groups do. And why this one's important is there's a guy running for governor in Kansas. You may know the name, Chris Kobach, someone who our friend Greg Palast calls KKK. He and the Kobach is the guy who brought forth the cross-check idea. He's running for governor of Kansas. Get ready for that. But he's on their board. So again, you look at, a guy who's running for governors, one of these top Republicans always loves, waving the flag and surrounding himself for photo ops. And he's on the board of this group, Veterans in Defense of Liberty. And he has no idea where the money's going. He's on the board, has no idea what their funding is, have no idea what they're spending money on, has no idea whatsoever. Just plain nuts. And if you believe it, I got a bridge, because he has to know. You don't sit on a board without knowing what's going on. But evidently 94% of their money went to fundraising. Didn't actually go to anything having to do with veterans. And why am I not surprised? Love to hear your thoughts. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break.
3,000 people screaming out, where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit millions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
There was a declared war on coal. The EPA was weaponized against certain sectors of our economy.
EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt lies about climate science over your public airwaves. Invest $1 in building disaster resilience, save $6 in economic losses. Dunkin' Donuts ditching polystyrene foam cups. Plus, California tosses a wrench into Trump's plans to expand offshore drilling.
All of that wrench tossing and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It was the past administration told us to choose between jobs and protecting the environment.
No, they didn't. You are a liar, Scott Pruitt, EPA Administrator. But this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I was listening to that Scott Pruitt interview, and I couldn't believe that the reporter was just sitting there letting Scott Pruitt lie and lie and lie again over our public airwaves.
Yes, it was pretty remarkable. Trump Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt used those public airwaves to lie about the cascading consequences of man-made climate change, despite the fact that scientists attribute the increase in deadly weather disasters like hurricanes and floods to global warming, despite the fact that scientists say these impacts are going to get even worse as climate change accelerates. Pruitt actually suggested in an interview with Las Vegas TV station KSNV that global warming might not be a bad thing.
I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing. Do we really know what the ideal surface temperature should be in the year 2100, in the year 2018? And that's somewhat fairly arrogant for us to think that we know exactly what it should be in 2100. So there are very important questions around the climate issue.
And did you see what he was doing there? He's trying a diversion tactic. We know that raising global temperatures has grave consequences right now, from economic losses due to more frequent extreme weather disasters to impacts on water availability and crop yields that trigger unrest in developing countries. Studies already show that high CO2 levels in the atmosphere actually reduce the nutritional content of the plants that we eat, and our emissions are also changing the chemistry of the oceans right now, harming shellfish and the coral reefs that supply food to billions of people.
And the other thing that we know is, yes, the climate right now, as is ideal for human beings. It's what allowed us to flourish for thousands of years. It is the stability of the climate which is now being destabilized by the burning of fossil fuels by Scott Pruitt's clients in the fossil fuel industry.
And if that's not enough impact for you, the U.S. Geological Survey announced this week that the world's largest known pool of toxic mercury is stored in permafrost in the Arctic. But now that permafrost is melting thanks to global warming, releasing poisonous mercury into the fragile Arctic environment.
And thanks to guys like Scott Pruitt.
Meanwhile, Bloomberg News reports that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has quietly reinstated Obama-era flood standards that Trump revoked last year.
Good.
That requires projects receiving federal funding to account for greater flood risks from global warming. And that is very good news because now researchers at the University of Colorado at Boulder have calculated that building for disaster resilience ultimately saves money. For every dollar that the government invests to make existing buildings more resistant to wildfires, earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes, taxpayers actually save $6 in property losses, business interruption, and public health costs. You got that? Every $1 spent on disaster resilience saves $6 in disaster losses.
Yeah, but they care more about pretending to their base that they are overturning whatever Obama did before they got there. And then once they see how stupid that is, they're quietly reversing it. So I'll take that as a victory.
Meanwhile, California has tossed a wrench into Trump's offshore drilling expansion plans. Reuters reports that the California State Lands Commission, which has jurisdiction over infrastructure, warned the Trump administration this week they intend to block the transport of any oil from new oil leases off of its coast by denying pipeline permits, saying, quote, "It is certain that the state would not approve new pipelines or allow the use of existing pipelines to transport oil from new leases.
So essentially, the state of California has control over the waters just off its coast?
Yes.
And they're able to say, no, you can't bring any pipelines through here.
That's right.
That's good.
Finally, some good news. Dunkin' Donuts has decided to join McDonald's and other fast food chains in reducing plastic waste, announcing this week that this year it will phase out the use of polystyrene foam cups in all of its stores on the planet by 2020 and switch to recyclable, sustainably sourced paper cups.
And that is good news, although I'm scratching my head wondering why they're waiting until 2020 to do this.
Well, they want to get rid of the ones they already have.
Right. For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I'm leaving here tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. Just one cup of coffee, then I'll go. Take it away, Daddy.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, you look at what's going on across this country on the education front, and it's about time there are groups all across the country organizing to protect their local public schools. Look, we've tried every gimmick under the sun, every bad idea, every silver bullet has been shot out. And what we found, well, the rich get richer and the poor, well, they get poorer. And as I understand, in Detroit on February 13th at the Spencer Patrick Auditorium on the campus of Wayne State University, another one of these organizing opportunities as people from across the area there head out and say, you know what, we want something better under the tag of We Choose, which is why I've asked Mulana Tolbert to come talk with us. He's the Chief Operating Officer with the Detroit Youth Report, and also Dana Hart. She's with Michigan We Choose. Guys, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem. How are you, Rick?
I am good. Tell me, what's going on, Mulana? What is going to happen Tuesday? What's the point of this?
So the whole idea is to have a conversation with the community to deal with the issue of Betsy DeVos being in office and how the effects of that kind of hurt the public school system.
Right.
We're going to have youth actually talk about their experiences from not just Detroit, but also other parts of the state of Michigan. So we got some youth coming from Albion, Michigan, and youth also coming from Inkster, Michigan, and a few youth coming from Chicago, Illinois, to talk about their experience. And the whole idea is to bring awareness to what's happened and also to continue to do work to build a statewide network across Michigan.
It's about time that we see this kind of organizing. Look, I grew up in Cleveland, where a place that has seen its share of bad ideas run through poor areas, poverty-ridden areas, areas of minority areas, areas of people of color, and it just seems like every bad idea gets tried out, tested out on those most vulnerable communities.
Yeah, and we say often it's not rocket science to know how to educate people. You have people in higher upper echelon neighborhoods that they have an educational system and works well. We're just saying we want to have that same educational system here.
Right.
So in our communities, we shouldn't have to go get trekked across the city when we have a school right across the street from our homes, but we can't go to that school.
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s in Cleveland, went through its busing era, and the exact same thing happened to us. They took us from one poor community on the west side of the city and moved us to another poor community on the other side of town, and same crummy resources, same buildings falling down, just a different location.
Absolutely. So the whole idea is that we want to make sure we promote the alternative to what's going on now, which we're saying is community schools, sustainable community schools.
Right.
And to have a sustainable community schools, there's 5 parts to it. And one of the parts is making sure the curriculum is engaging and culturally relevant. Another one is high quality teaching and not high test taking. Wraparound support is important. Positive discipline, so zero tolerance, and transformational parent and community engagement. Those are the things that we highlight for sustainable community schools.
No, those are really important. All of them important issues. Let me bring in Dana Hart here. She's a member of the Michigan We Choose group. Dana, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, what brings you to this? What's your passion in this fight?
Well, I actually have a daughter who is deaf, and I just had to do a lot of advocacy work for her on her behalf to ensure that she had an appropriate public school education. Excuse me. So my thing is, there is this illusion of school choice that we have for children, and my daughter actually was not allowed to. She wasn't able to go to a charter school based on they get pretty much the pick of the litter, so they don't usually accept children with disabilities, which is kind of how I got introduced to it. But this illusion of school choice that parents are facing, like you mentioned, during the busing era, you were bused from one, poor school district to yet another. So this illusion of school choices, there are studies that show that charter schools don't perform better than public schools. So why not take those monies, that tax dollars, which there are billions of dollars at stake, which is why private companies are ready to plunder these tax dollars, billions of dollars at stake. Take that money and improve these existing public schools.
Let me ask you the We Choose frame, because I saw that and I got to be honest, my first reaction was, wow, are we going to be pushing the charter schools? Are we going to be pushing this alternative for-profit stuff? Because that's the frame that we get from the right wing. We should have the right to choose the schools our kids get to go to, and then they frame it in, we can send our kids to the best private schools, even though we both know that's never going to happen.
Right.
Right. You're right. It's not going to happen. And the thing is, just because you take, and a lot of the schools, I'll say in Detroit, we do have physical problems in our buildings. But just because you take a charter school and you have a nice, pretty building, that does not mean that your child is going to get a better education. So what we need to do is inform parents so they know, what does a quality education look like? What does a wonderful school look like for your child so they can make informed decisions? We don't need this, like I said, the illusion of school choice. So
Right.
You're picking from, one bad apple.
No, I've always said, maybe we should focus on having one really, really good system instead of having dueling or competing bad ones. But I wanted to get your thoughts, Maulana. The frame that you're using, I'm curious your thoughts on how you came to that and if it's the best frame.
So we believe that it is a great frame, and the reason why is because growing up in the city of Detroit, we had a community where the community took care of each other. So where if you went to a school, more than likely you had family members that worked in that school, and if they weren't family members, you had people that was connected to your family from a long time ago. I went to a school where my physical education teacher and my math teacher taught my parents. So once you start to build something out farther from that, you get disconnected to the community. And the reason why that's important, because you can't teach people that you don't love. So you got people coming in from out of your community trying to educate you, but they're not successful, not because they don't know how to teach. Well, that's part of it. But the main thing is they don't understand the cultural nuances, and that's very important in any city that you go into, in any community that you go into.
Now, you said at the beginning that this is about Betsy DeVos, and a part of it is about her tenure as Secretary of Education. And fortunately, she hasn't. It's my view in looking from the outside, and maybe you'll disagree with me, that she hasn't really done much horrible yet, because I don't think she can find where the bathroom is yet. But as I've seen, her grade's not very good. I mean, I think the NEA and AFT gave her an F as for her report card for this year.
Yes. That's absolutely true. But the whole thing is the potential of that. We don't have support from a local grassroots level inside of the administration now. So that's the most scariest thing. So the things that we are challenged with now, if you take New Orleans, for example, I'm going to take it just outside of Detroit. The whole school system is charter.
Yep.
So the issue is they're trying to reproduce that around the city. And so around the nation. So what we're trying to do is provide awareness to the community and start organizing around that to create this alternative that'll be more beneficial for the people invested in it and around that community.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's always been my view that what they did in New Orleans, you're right. They wanted to replicate all across the country for a couple reasons. One, you get to break up those nasty teachers unions who want to have some say in how the curriculum is taught and the conditions under which teachers labor. And the other part of it is they wanted to cash in. They wanted some of that education money because we spend billions and billions of dollars on education, and they wanted to pocket a good portion of it.
And another part to that is that now when you take the community outside of the school, you're dealing with taxation without representation. Now these schools can do whatever they want, whereas before you had the superintendent of a school, you had the school board to kind of govern that school. So if citizens wanted to say, hey, we don't like what you're doing, they would have to contend with making changes. But when you're dealing with charter schools, they can do what they want to do. It's a private institution.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let me ask you, Dana. As the Michigan We 2 group, comes together, and as you guys are working towards a future of community schools, what's the main first step that you're seeing in this? Is it reclaiming the neighborhood schools? Is it policy? What do you see?
I think the main step is building our capacity and building that statewide network. A lot of the issues that have occurred in public education in these communities of color have happened in an isolated fashion. So in Inkster, they lost their school district. Their buildings were torn down, but people in Detroit weren't aware that had happened. In Albion, their school district was annexed by Marshall Public Schools. So they don't have any representation as far as their children's education. So all these battles were happening in an isolated manner. So we have a saying that you have to nationalize the local work, because we all have these battles that we're working on, and we can learn from each other. And as we work collectively, that builds a stronger voice. And people power, collective people power, always outweighs money power.
Yeah,
so
I like to say the wealthy have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. There are more of us, and we should be getting what we want because there are more of us. Yet what they've done masterfully, and you got to give the wealthy credit. They have pitted communities against each other. They've pitted us white against black, male against female, old against young. They've sliced and diced us in ways that we can't even comprehend yet. And education being part of that, because I can't imagine that any middle class white suburb would ever allow the kind of policy that's been forced upon minority communities and poverty communities in this country to exist in theirs. It just would never happen.
Absolutely,
you're right.
Absolutely.
And there was an article that MLive had published here in Michigan, and it showed how charter schools were affecting school districts across the state of Michigan. And there were school districts, in white communities, suburban communities, rural communities that were losing out, and they're losing money based on this. So this is a good reason for us to band together to strengthen our public schools.
Yeah, you wanted to say something, Milana?
Sorry. Yeah, ditto. Yeah, I can't come behind that. That's absolutely correct.
Because I look at this at the end of the day, what has to happen if we're going to move Look, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. We were where they put the socioeconomic ladder on top of. And it was because I got a decent education. It was because I had opportunities to get helping hands through, government programs and through my union and those things that I now live a fairly decent middle-class lifestyle. I want that for every child. I want that for every me at this point to have those opportunities and those ladders. And it all comes back to that education. If we cheat a generation of students, white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. If we cheat them out of an education, their lives are never going to get better.
And not only that, it brings the community down. So one thing, when I grew up, I had a YMCA to go to. I had my friend's backyard to go to. When you take all of these things away from the youth, you wonder why, especially in lower income communities, why we choose the results that we choose, which is never positive. So if we don't have more investment inside the community via the schools, then what's the alternative? Oh, that's another thing I didn't mention about the sustainable community schools. A lot of the sustainable community schools that exist now, the community uses that building. So you have churches that go in and uses the space. You have clubs that go in and do basketball tournaments for people inside the community. So it's like the heartbeat of the community. And if you take that away from people, you leave them with no other choice. So, yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah, I go back and I think of in my lifetime, you had George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, who one of his ideas was, midnight basketball at those schools, and now we're locking them up and privatizing them to the profiteers. Where I don't know if you saw in Philadelphia, there was one that was actually using the school as a nightclub at night. Not quite the community use that I think we're talking about, but they figured out how.
Not at all.
Let me ask you a last line of questioning, because you've got this event coming up next Tuesday on the campus of Wayne State University. You're bringing speakers in, and you're organizing out of this. What are you hoping for the event, and then what are you hoping the day after?
So for the event, we're hoping to get people to come out in the masses, which is looking positive, and and make sure that they come and get involved. They join the Michigan We Choose, or join the groups that's there. To bring awareness to the community, also to bring awareness to other cities inside of Michigan. After that, we want to start to actually go out and meet with folks and build the statewide network.
And Diane, you got a comment?
No, that's definitely what we want to do. Our goal is definitely to bring attention to what's going on and to build our statewide network and work with other communities across the United States that are experiencing the very same thing that
Good stuff, Dana. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you Diane. And what are you hoping then, after this, Diane, Dana, what are you hoping comes the day after? What are you hoping other parents will do going forward?
I hope our phones are ringing off the hook. I hope people are calling us and finding out how they can get involved. I hope they're calling us to find out, how they can get more information, how we can help them. Because I do realize that, some parents are working, 2 to 3 jobs, and still, they are interested in making sure that their children get an education. And that's where some of us who may have the time and the passion can kick in and really assist their children as well. So we just want people to, reach out and find out how they can receive help or how they can jump in and assist us.
It's all about organizing. It's all about taking control of your community and holding the accountable. Malua, I appreciate you taking time for us. Dana, thanks so much. I wish you the best on Tuesday, and I'd love to have you come back when it's over and tell us how things went.
Will do. Thanks again.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. We'll get links at thericksmithshow.com of how you can take a look at the things that are going on. Good stuff. It's the kind of organizing we absolutely need to have. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So you may remember the other day we talked about Kimberly-Clark. Evidently, they're going to be closing or selling or getting rid of about 10 manufacturing facilities across the country. They're going to reduce their workforce by as high as 13% or as many as 5,500 jobs. And as we talked about, 2 of the big closures are going to be in Wisconsin. Now, what Governor Scott Walker is talking about doing, and you gotta love this. And this is when I first saw this story. Immediately, I started thinking about what we see from these big companies, which is they announce there's going to be a layoff. We've got plants all over the place, so we're gonna lay off a bunch of people. And then you throw it out there to these different governors to go, okay, well, how bad do you want to keep them in your state? How much money are you going to divvy up? Well, it looks like Scott Walker's looking at giving them as much, I guess, as they're giving to Foxconn, which is an enormous sum of money. Evidently, he is asking the Wisconsin legislature to raise the tax credit limit from 7% of payroll all the way up to 17% of payroll, which means the workers will still have jobs, but 17% of their paychecks will be going to to the Kimberly-Clark. Stop and think about the Koch brothers. Now, we know the Koch brothers are major owners there. Stop and think about the major windfall that goes to them. Stop and think about putting a governor like Walker into that position like they did and the payoff that this would be. It's wow, what a game. What a game. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.